Hello everyone, and welcome to another Directions Mag Geospatial webinar. Today co-sponsored with our friends over at the GeoTech Center. I'm Barbara Duke, Managing Editor here at Directions Magazine, with our assistant webinar producer, Lynette Qualia. If you have any questions about your connection, just drop us a note in the chat. We're going to do our best to help you. For those of you who don't know, Directions Magazine has been around for more than 20 years, and we encourage you to stop by, read those feature articles, catch up on the geospatial news, and of course, watch more webinars. We're excited to have Dr. Rich Schultz and Vince Donato also with us today. And Rich, I think you're going to tell us a little more about the GeoTech Center.
Thank you, Barbary. I'm Rich Schultz, the Associate Director for the National Geospatial Technology Center of Excellence. We affectionately refer to that as the GeoTech Center. That's a National Science Foundation funded advanced technology education grant, and we're headquartered at Jefferson Technical and Community College in Louisville, Kentucky, where our director is Vince Donato. The GeoTech Center was established in 2009. We've been active in best practices of geospatial technologies, and more recently in drone education, including development of curriculum, professional development that we do, and a number of workshops offered to improve the development of the drone community and drone industry. Team members that we have are located across the United States, stretching from the West Coast to the East Coast and everywhere in between. I would invite everyone to visit our website at geotechcenter.org, like you see on your screen, to learn more about what we do and what our mission is as a National Center of Excellence and a leader in UAS education and industry developments. I wanted to mention also of special interest is the virtual GeoEd 20 conference this year. That's coming up next month, and our virtual regional workshops throughout the summer and into the fall also. And again, I'll just refer to everyone to the geotechcenter.org site for further information. I'll note that we have record registration numbers this year for the conference, so that's going to prove to be very informative and should be a lot of fun. With that, I'll send it back to you, Barbary, to talk about the agenda for today's event and to introduce our speaker.
All right, thanks so much. I encourage everybody to attend those GeoTech Center offerings. They are always informative. So folks, you can ask questions anytime during the webinar. Just type those into the chat and we will do our best to answer as many as we can at the end of the session. If you see something you like on the screen, you can click that little camera button and that will save an image on your desktop. We encourage you to keep an eye on your inbox after the webinar. We will be there with links as well as an attendance certificate and, of course, an opportunity to view the recording. We also appreciate your information on the polls and surveys. So today we are excited to learn more about resources for geospatial professionals transitioning out of the military. Topic certainly near and dear to my heart. My dad was in the Army. Rodney is joining us today from Virginia and is the Assistant Director of the GeoTech Center. Rodney, welcome. We are glad to have you with us today and excited to learn about all these wonderful resources that you've collected for us.
Thank you, Barbary. So everyone, as Rich pointed out before, the GeoTech Center, which is how I'll refer to it because I am very affectionate when it comes to the GeoTech Center, having worked there for a number of years now, we endeavored to compile a number of resources that might be of use to veterans specifically transitioning out of the military into higher education. Upon working with it, though, it also looks like these are resources that might be useful in some contexts to institutions as well or other governmental agencies. So whomever can have access to them, and we provide free access to everyone. I would encourage you to look at this material. To access the material off the main GeoTech Center website, which is geotechcenter.org, we would go under the Professional tab and then Veterans Resources. And so as we look at Veterans Resources, there are a number of areas that we are addressing. So these all are accessible, and there are many documents and files and sites that I will go over today, doing a thumbnail sketch, if you will, of what is there. And all those are freely available. The only exception would be when I talk about the voluntary education program that's been newly instituted by the Department of Defense. It is a program to replace the Service Member Opportunity Colleges program, and I'll talk to that when I get to that area, but I did want to let you know that everything we discussed is available on our site, save for that one area. And as soon as we can get back on campus and get that loaded up, we will do so as well. If anyone's looking for that or those files, if they want to reach out directly, we will get those to you regardless. And so what I want to do is first start with some useful web links for veterans and service members. And so this information applies that if you're currently in service or if you are a veteran transitioning over, as we said before. And there are a number of things that you need to think about when you're looking at your higher education, if you haven't already. And so I want to touch on some of the websites that have some information that you might want to be thinking about. So for example, let's just say the GI Bill comparison tool. Depending on the veteran that you are or the service member that you are, there are a number of different chapters, quote unquote, and that's how it's organized for the GI Bill. And it's important that you as a service member or veteran recognize the benefits of different chapters. I myself have used 3 different chapters of the GI Bill. When I first started out in school, I used a chapter for my time on active duty. Then subsequently, my father passed, and I inherited his benefits, and I used those as I was progressing through graduate school. And then most recently, after retiring, I have had some benefits from deployment in the earlier part of this century, and used those to get through another graduate program. So the point being is you may be in possession of multiple chapters at the same time, and you need to be aware of the advantages of each chapter. They pay out differently, they have different areas that they're focusing on, and so you really need to compare them to see what is in your best interest. And so that's why I wanted to touch on the GI Bill comparison tool, because I thought that it's a great resource that that you might want to take advantage of as you get ready to transition. Now, there are other resources that we talk about, and as we look at those resources, we have to ask the question, what is the source and what is the nature of that resource? So for example, the Yellow Ribbon Campaign or program is a program that is great. It pays additional funding to students, but you need to be aware that your institution may not qualify for a Yellow Ribbon, or may not have the Yellow Ribbon program, or you may not qualify for the Yellow Ribbon program based upon your service, et cetera, et cetera. They're fairly stringent requirements, and rightfully so. So the point is you don't want the Yellow Ribbon program to be out there and you not check in to see if you qualify. And so that's why I wanted to have this this site there as well. Now, we're not going to go over every site throughout the list. That would take the entire seminar just in and of itself. But I did want to talk about a number of things that you might want to look at. One is, for you to use the GI Bill, you have to be attending some accredited program. And the way in which you might want to find out about whether a program is accredited is to use this site here that we have here from the Department of Education, where you can search for accredited programs. And so that would be very helpful for you to make sure that you don't investigate and then begin to attend or attempt to attend an institution that is not accredited, because you will not receive funding from the Veterans Administration if it's not recognized as an accredited program. among other requirements. Another link that I want to touch on, and we'll come back to this later, is the American Council on Education. And we'll talk more about the Military Guide to College Credit, but I wanted to touch on it for a moment here to stress how important ACE is in your attempt to transfer as many hours of qualifying credit you have into an academic program. And we'll review later in the webinar how to navigate this site. But ACE is the determining body about what credit you can receive. They make determinations of what you qualify for. The institution that you attend will make a determination of what they will allow you credit for. And there's some conversations in there as well that we can talk about. But we will get back to that subsequently when we talk about the crosswalk of competencies from your military service over into higher education. So the next area I wanted to talk about was service member opportunity colleges. And this is the area that I spoke about before where we've added a number of resources. And so I'll be going locally in a moment here to look at those resources and describe them to you and their importance. But there are three different areas that we're looking at. One is service member opportunity colleges. The other is the voluntary education program. And lastly, our military-friendly schools. And so what the Department of Defense did, they decided during the middle of last year that they wanted to transition away from service member opportunity colleges. One of the primary reasons for that is because the vast majority, upwards of 90% of all service members, current service members, they are taking online instruction. And one of the reasons for the development of SOCs was to facilitate when a service member transfers or is transferred from, say, Fort Bragg to Fort Dix, and how those credits transfer from institution to institution and protecting their rights. And so that's one of the driving forces behind the SOC program. But with so many of current service members taking online courses and programs, and veterans not facing the transfer hurdle that they did during active duty, the Department of Education and Department of Defense decided that this was no longer necessary and transitioned over to the voluntary education program. And so as we talk about the voluntary education program, I want to bring that up. Okay, and so within the voluntary education program, we've got a number of resources that I wanted to show you. One is actually a briefing that talks about the voluntary education program. This briefing lays out the program itself and the components of the program, and will explain the program better if it comes up. So we also have other items such as sample MOUs between the programs themselves. We have a installation or institution MOU guide, and this guide, what this guide does is walks the institution through what they have to agree to and adhere to sign off on this memorandum of understanding with the Department of Defense. One of the components within that, itself is that that institution has to sign off on the voluntary education program if it wishes to receive tuition assistance from the the Veterans Affairs approved by the Department of Defense. And so that's going to be critically important for them because that's a large funding source. And so this is the voluntary educational partnership, and this is the MOU page itself. And this is the MOU that is set up between the institution and the Department of Defense. And what's important about that is it really protects your rights as a student if you wish to attend that institution. What's interesting about the voluntary education program itself is it takes upon it many of the components of the now sunset Service Member Opportunity Colleges program. And it really protects the rights of a veteran or a service member as they are attempting to transition to higher education or to get transfer credit, etc. And so the Voluntary Education Partnership is really a very helpful resource for those veterans as they seek to go through that transition. And so this is not yet on our website, but it and all of its links are going to be posted on the website. One of the things, for example, that we could look at is the institution guide that I was talking about. And so the institution guide itself, it helps walk an institution through what they need to do to adhere to the MOU and to receive that tuition assistance. While we're waiting for that to come up, the other thing I wanted to talk about under higher education itself is military-friendly schools. Now, one thing I would say about military-friendly schools is the designation of military-friendly schools is a designation set by an independent third party. So that designation has no U.S. government affiliation whatsoever. It is a veteran-owned company, and it does supply branding to colleges and universities itself. And so this is the MOU before we step off of that, the MOU guide, and it takes institutions through the entire process of how they would go through completing the MOU itself. And so that can be quite helpful for students as they attempt to do that, as they attempt to find a military-friendly school itself. The other thing about a military-friendly college is that there are different tiers for a military-friendly college. And so you can follow our links to find a college that is military-friendly or not, but there are different tiers. And these tiers, you have bronze, silver, gold, etc., which designates how many of the components or criteria that these colleges meet. So they should pretty much have to take CLEP, which we'll talk about in a moment. They have to award credit for your service as well as your schools that you've taken through the military. But do they have a yellow ribbon program? Do they have a vet organization on campus? Do they have facilities for veterans on campus? Do they have counselors for veterans on campus? All these things add up through a point system to rate them higher within the military-friendly college criterion, in the strata. And so it's not government related, but it is a good sort of guide that will help you get a sense for how friendly your institution is, or the intended institution is, toward veterans in the military themselves. And so we've talked about in this sector the service member opportunity colleges themselves. We've talked about the voluntary education partnership, which occurs between the Department of Defense and the institutions of higher education as well. And we talked about military-friendly schools. So there are a lot of terms that are thrown around, but they mean something, and we want to make sure that we recognize the differences. So next, what I want to talk about is the military to civilian occupation translator. This is intended primarily for veterans as they transition out of the military to see what jobs or careers align well with their military occupational specialty. And so the reason why it's important for us here is not only is workforce development something that we believe in, but this can also give students a good idea about what academic programs that they might be interested in if they're intending to continue what they've learned in the military, the experiences they've gained in the military, and parlay that into an aligned academic program. And so that's one of the reasons why we wanted to look at that, for example. And so one of the sites we have is a military crosswalk search, and this is actually supported by the Department of Labor, and this is on their ONET page. And what we can do here is you can select a branch, so I'll select Army, that's the one I'm most familiar with, and an MOS, which is 12 Delta, and see what we come up with. And so these are two different areas. Now, if currently 12 Delta is aligned with a diver in the military, and so these are the different potential occupations you might find on the civilian sector. Now, these, as you might well imagine, aren't your typical programs in higher education, but still, it tells you how they align with occupations. If you look at the bottom, and this is a clear distinction, we also have 12 Delta was aligned with certain other positions, but now has become defunct. Specifically, for example, a 12 Delta Army commissioned officer was a was actually a facilities manager, and it aligns with a construction manager. So if that's something you're interested in, this might be a direction you might want to go. If you're an Army officer, you would be going to graduate school at a minimum, having already achieved your bachelor's degree in order to get your commission. We also have other items that we can talk about. This is from this source here is from military.com. It does it a little bit differently than the Department of Labor site in how it pulls up the different the occupations and whatnot. Let's just go again to the Army for a second, and let's put in 35 golf. Okay, 35 golf. So this actually, what it does, it pulls up active civilian jobs that are out there that align with that particular job. So electronic warfare, signals intelligence, these are the jobs that military.com thinks that might be well aligned. What you should notice is it runs the full spectrum from jobs that are basically supervisory, such as say maintenance supervisor, to jobs that really do align better with, say, a telecom technician or a cell phone technician with your given trained area. So these are two different ways to give service members, as they're trying to transition out, some idea about the world that's out there and what jobs are out there, what occupations are out there, what careers are out there. Now, we're going to look more deeply into the guide for an evaluation of educational experiences later when we do the crosswalk, but I did want to put it in here just in case someone wanted to see it. The reason is primarily because when we look at this, we're going to see how different jobs align in the military, align with certain academic credit. Now, this guide is maintained by the American Council on Education, and they work in conjunction with the military services and the different branches of the military and the Department of Defense to make a determination about the experiences and the knowledge you gained in the military. And so that should be helpful. The military guide itself is your bread and butter for the American Council on Education, the military guide. The area where you be looking for your course search or occupation search, these are the areas, and we'll walk through this a few times to talk about it. But the military guide itself is a huge resource in and of itself. And So I would really encourage you, you can Google ACE or ACE Military Guide, and it will bring it up, no problem. We have all those links loaded as well on our website, so don't concern yourself with that as well. I'm going to put this over or keep this up for now so that we can continue to move forward. Let me see if there's anything else I want to talk about the translator. So now what I want to talk about is something that many people may not be aware of, and that is the Joint Services Transcript. All right, and the Joint Services Transcript is a fairly new entity. The Joint Services Transcript should maintain a record of all of the experience you've acquired in the military, as well as courses you've taken, even down to online courses that may be as little as 1 or 2 hours. I will tell you that that is not always the case. Okay, and when we look at those items, you're going to find that you're not going to have everything there that should be there. Okay, and that's going to present a problem. You do have an option though, and the way you can address that is you can always reach out to this webpage here, okay, the Joint Services Transcript page at the Department of Defense, okay. And what this page does is it is a portal in which you can go in and you can request your Joint Service Transcript. The reason it's a Joint Service Transcript is all branches feed their information now into one central site for that record. So if you go to the Joint Service Transcript, it's still pulling up, what you're going to find is you'll have to do a login. You have to create a login and password, which is going to be important. But you're also going to have to then request your transcript. And then once you request your transcript, you can download it, and then you can review it. If you find shortcomings or issues or concerns with the transcript, that's when you can reach out to the Department of Defense at the jst@ded.mil site, and that'll give you that information. So when you look at your transcript, it is a little bit hard initially to break it down, understand it, follow along, etc. And so one of the reasons why I wanted to bring up my transcript is so that you can see sort of how it works and what's broken about the system and what is great about the system at the same time. Because there are some irregularities that you need to be aware of before you go in, and you need to understand your rights as a service member, as a veteran, to have this information and to have it represent what you actually did while in service. So this is an example of a Joint Services Transcript. This is my transcript. I feel safe, since it's mine, that I can release it out. It is protected by FERPA, and so that's something to be aware of. It lists who you are, your status, etc. And then it lists not only your experience, but your courses as well. And so, for example, here, and this is sort of interesting. So the first course that comes up is Infantry Mortar Leader course, okay? And that was 6 weeks in beautiful, scenic Fort Benning, Georgia, back in the spring of 1994. Now you see here that no credit is recommended for those 6 enjoyable weeks. The reason is, I think, may be obvious. There's not a really good transition or translation of skills as a mortar platoon leader to the academic world. And so ACE did not see that any value was there for academic credit, and so they awarded none. Conversely, if you look down at the next entry in 1984, I received training as a dial manual central office system repairer back in 1984, and there was a lot of electronics training within that program, and you see the recommended credit here from ACE. So this is ACE recommended credit, okay? And the L means for lower level baccalaureate. Now, this is recommended by ACE. Now, you will also, if you go to the military guide on the ACE site, you can also see these values calculated there in an exhibit. But my point is that I wanted you to see this here just to see it in a transcript. So if you don't have it in an exhibit, you can still get credit in this scenario here. But you see these are just different areas where you might receive credit. I received additional credit for being a telephone central office repairer later in my career, et cetera, et cetera. So I wanted you to see a example of a transcript. Also, college level test scores. I did not take any CLEPs. I did not try to CLEP out of any academic courses. And so I did not have anything in this section here. And these are other learning experiences. And those areas, they may or may not have been evaluated. These were not evaluated for credit for a variety of reasons. Most of them were because most of my training was in the area of combat arms, which doesn't translate well to civilian academic programs. So that's a example of a transcript. Here is the page itself. If you have a login and password, you would log in, and once you sign in, then you can request your transcript and then use that to speak with your institution about receiving credit. That's one way you can do it. We'll also look at the exhibits that are produced by the American Council on Education as well. I like to culminate the webinar talking about really one of the areas that we like to focus upon is crosswalk of competencies from the military service over to academia. And so this page that we have pulled up here really addresses that area. And so what it has is we've already gone into ACE, and please remember that ACE continuously updates their exhibits, and these exhibits are the documents that are created to show what credit that ACE is recommending. And again, I want to stress that they're recommending this. They go through a lot of effort to recommend a certain number of hours of credit, but it's ultimately the institution's responsibility to award the credit. Having those exhibits, though, as an independent third party, when you walk into that institution, will help you greatly, basically state your case, if you will, to get the credit that you think is appropriate. So we have focused at the GeoTech Center on two areas. Those two areas are the geospatial area and the unmanned aerial systems area. And for that, we developed basically a database of these exhibits. And so what I want to do is pull up some of the exhibits to show how they might look. And we're still pulling up. One of the things I would speak to is what we're going to go into is we're going to do an occupation search. We're going to do a school search. But if for whatever reason it doesn't make sense, you didn't remember where we were going, the American Council on Education actually has YouTube videos, how to search for courses and how to search for occupations. And so you can go to our website at any time, and if you want to do a search or remember how to do a search, just click on the YouTube video, pull it up, and go from there. We put every occupation that we could find and every school that we could find within there. And so these are an example of some of the ones that we have found. These are specifically jobs that are aligned with different military occupational specialties. And so, for example, MCE, or Marine Corps, MOS, for example, Army, NER, Navy, I believe Air Force is AF as well. And so if we pull up Geographic Intelligence Specialists, what this is going to pull up would be an exhibit, as I said before. That exhibit will show you what the American Council on Education felt was an appropriate amount of credit to award to a student or prospective student who had gone through this training or gone or had this occupation. And so it will list in the exhibit, say the name of the course or the name of the job title, how these evaluations were coordinated or calculated based upon rank or exposure. So, for example, Geographic Intelligence Specialist goes here, the career pattern itself. That's important because as we get to the bottom, we will see what is recommended as far as credit. So there's a description as well as related competencies. All this is data and information that you can provide to either someone in the registrar's office or someone in the academic program area, etc., to say, these are the things we covered. This is the stuff that I learned in my career, etc. And as we look at the bottom here, we see that there are different number of student hours that are awarded or are recommended to be awarded based upon the rank. And that's simply because you would have been in longer, you would have done more of this type of work, etc. But you see, for example, for a staff sergeant in lower division baccalaureate or in a associate degree program, 3 semester hours in supervision, okay, 3 semester hours in geographic intelligence, and 3 in geospatial information systems. So you would get that as, or potentially get that for transfer credit, okay? So that's going to be really important. And we have those exhibits, as I mentioned before, lined up for the geospatial technology courses, UAS courses in schools, as well as the different occupations which we just looked at. The last thing I want to make sure that we get to is to show you quickly how to do a course or an occupation search. Okay, so if we're going to do a course search, we're going to need to know something about what's in the title of the course. So I'm just going to put in geospatial and do search. And so you may sometimes have to be more broad in your initial search and then narrow it down once you find the job that you held. So let's say that you were a geospatial engineer, non-commissioned officer, okay, an NCO, all right? And so this is the exhibit on their site. It talks about here again, learning outcomes, instruction, and credit recommendation. This is an exhibit that you could take to your academic institution. Now, let's see. We go back, we haven't looked yet at a course, and so I want to look at a course as well. So remember, you can get credit for not only your experience, but also your courses. So don't just think one will cover it. There will be some overlap for sure. There will be overlap, but you're going to want to take advantage of both to get as much credit as possible as you're attempting to go into your academic program. All right, so I'll do Intel, okay. Oh, that is educational experiences. Well, let's just make C. All right, so we have these areas for intelligence. I bet you I've got 5 pages of intelligence, 349 entries. I bet you didn't know there was that much intelligence in the Department of Defense, did you? But for the Air Force, we have here intelligence officer, okay. And here again, this is talking about what credit is recommended for that particular position. Let me go back over before we wrap up and do one last thing here. Okay, so these are different courses for engineer that you might have taken that you would get credit for again. One thing I wanted to bring up, you see where there are multiples of the same title, they apply to different years. And so you would need to pull the whatever year band you were in so that you get the correct credit. Okay. So everyone, what we talked about today was veteran resources that we have on file at the GeoTech Center. We talked about different web links that veterans or institutions might want to be aware of. We talked about the Service Member Opportunity Colleges, Military-Friendly Colleges, and the Volunteer Educational Partnership. We looked at the military to civilian occupation translators, how they might be of use, the Joint Service Transcript itself, and how it is a very valuable commodity as you're trying to get academic credit, as well as doing a search for a crosswalk of competencies from the military to the academic world, remembering that you can pull exhibits for both occupations and courses that you've taken. All right. So that concludes my my briefing on these topics. Do we have any questions, Barbary?
Rich, you want to chime in with those?
Rodney, you've given us so many resources here. Kind of where is the first place to start? If you were working with a military person and came to you and said, you know, I see all these resources that you've shown us, where would be a good starting point for someone?
You mean outside of, well, outside of, say, our site? I think what we try to do at the site itself is lay things out. But really, there are two things I think you really have to be aware of. You really have to be aware of the links to make sure that the institution that you're interested in is accredited and is recognized and has signed the Voluntary Education Partnership, so that one, you can receive your GI Bill funding if you attend there. And secondly, I would look at the ACE site, the American Council on Education, because they, the activities that they perform are represented and reflected not only in your joint service transcript, but also in the exhibits. I would go as soon as I have the opportunity and I finish my training or whatnot, and I was going to transition, pull a joint service transcript. You want to have that as a minimum as a resource.
So thanks everyone for being here today. We really appreciate your input on the poll on the way out, and hope that you'll keep an eye on your inbox. We'll be there with the recording should you need to see these things again, as well as an attendance certificate. You can add that to your portfolio as well. Thanks, Rodney. We appreciate you sharing your expertise, and special thanks to Rich and Vince for hanging out with us as well. We hope that you will join us again for another of the GeoTech Center Directions Mag partnered webinars coming up next quarter, and certainly for any of the other webinars that we have going on here at Directions Magazine. Everybody have a great day. Tell a friend.